This is CNN Breaking News.
We do have major breaking news for you this morning involving the Israel-Hamas war. The International Criminal Court just this morning announced it is seeking arrest warrants for Israel's political and military leadership, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity, and for 3 leaders of Hamas for the October 7th terrorist attack, including Yahya Sinwar, who is in Gaza, and Ismail Haniyeh, who lives in Qatar and has been party to the ceasefire negotiations. CNN's chief international anchor and correspondent Christian Amanpour broke this story in an exclusive interview with ICC prosecutor Karim Khan. You're joining us now from The Hague. Christian, can you give us what details stood out to you during this interview in an unprecedented move by the ICC?
Absolutely. In terms of unprecedented, that's because the charges against Israel are for the first time a charge against an actual democracy and a democratic leader. I think one must not de-emphasize and ignore the severity of the charges against Hamas. And they issued this seeking approval for arrest warrants according to the timeline. So they laid out the arrest warrants that they want for Hamas, which included 8 counts of crimes against humanity and war crimes, which were, mass killings. They call it extermination, torture, rape and sexual assault, even in captivity of the hostages, all the things that went on against the civilians inside Israel on October 7th. And then they turned to what happened in and subsequently in Israel's war against Gaza and against Hamas, where they focused quite heavily on starvation as a weapon of war. Here is what ICC Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan told me. We're here at the ICC. You are today announcing that you are applying for arrest warrants for top military and political leadership in the Israel-Gaza war since the October 7th events. First and foremost, explain to me exactly what you're asking for and who you are charging.
Today, Christian, we've applied for warrants to the pretrial chamber of the International Criminal Court in relation to 3 individuals that are Hamas members. Sinwar, who's in charge on the ground.
That's Yahya Sinwar?
Absolutely. Daif, who's in charge of the Al-Qassam Brigade. And Haniyeh, who's one of their political bureau based in Doha.
What are the charges?
The charges are extermination, murder, taking of hostages, rape and sexual assault in detention. So these are the key crimes that are alleged to have been committed by these 3 individuals. The world was shocked on the 7th of October when people were ripped from their bedrooms, from their homes, from the different kibbutzim in Israel. And people have suffered enormously, and we have a variety of evidence to support the applications that we've submitted to the judges.
You have also issued warrants against the top political and military leadership of the government of the State of Israel.
We've applied for warrants. Of course, the judges must determine whether or not to issue them, but we've applied today. We'll apply for warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and also Minister of Defense Gallant for the crimes of causing extermination, causing starvation as a method of war, including the denial of humanitarian relief supplies, deliberately targeting civilians in conflict.
So again, this process right now is to request the arrest warrants. That will be a panel of trial judges here at the ICC. Will examine this request and then will rule on it one way or another. ICC Prosecutor Khan was at pains to tell me that already he had an independent panel to look over these, this step of the process and to judge whether they were on the right track. And unanimously they did. And there were very distinguished distinguished global jurists, including Ted Meron, who was the former ICC president and also himself a Holocaust survivor, and at one point he was advisor to the Israeli Foreign Ministry many decades ago. So they have a very distinguished panel of jurists who he ran all this by before even making today's announcement. And what they agree is that the ICC has requested and has presented what the evidence it says could get a conviction, not just that would stand up in a court and go to trial, but that could get a conviction based on all the evidence they have presented, some of which is in the public sphere on both sides, some of which they have received from talking to all the relevant individuals and parties, victims and others.
Christiane Amanpour, such great reporting. This is huge news. It's going to have both political and diplomatic fallout as we go out throughout the day and week and many months to go. Thank you so much for all of your reporting there. Appreciate you. Okay.
And joining us right now is CNN national security analyst, former Deputy Director of National Intelligence, Beth Sanner, and Ian Bremmer, the president and founder of the Eurasia Group and G0 Media. Beth, I want to get your reaction to everything that Christiane's laid out, what we've now learned from the ICC, and also this, who just was handed a statement coming from Benny Gantz, a member of the Israeli War Cabinet, of course, someone who has clashed with Netanyahu on strategy and far beyond of recent. Here's what Benny Gantz just put out in a statement, Beth. While Israel fights with one of the strictest moral codes in history while complying with international law and boasting a robust independent judiciary, drawing parallels between the leaders of a democratic country determined to defend itself from despicable terror to leaders of a bloodthirsty terror organization is a deep distortion of justice and blatant moral bankruptcy.
There's a lot here, right? Let me just take the Gantz point here. What is going to happen as a result of this this first step, right? Very much a first step. We don't know where it's going to go. We don't know that it will actually get to the point of arrest warrants. But the effects of this are actually going to be quite counter, I think, to what anybody who's rejoicing this kind of balanced, what Khan is trying to do is a kind of a balanced approach to this, because we're going to see a circling of the wagons in Israel. I think this will benefit Netanyahu, and I think it also will make it very, very much more difficult to actually get to a ceasefire. And that is an argument the United States has consistently made in terms of the ICC intervention in the whole Palestinian Israel conflict, even before this. But we have a couple of steps here to go, and I'm not at all certain that it will result in actual arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant at the end of the day. But I'll stop there.
Stop there for now. I know there is a lot we need to pick through. Ian, what do you see in this? Beth has a really interesting point in looking at the real and practical implications of this. She thinks this is going to make it harder to get to a ceasefire. What do you see here?
That's true. I think it's also been harder because Netanyahu is running the government, and for him to stay in power, he needs to keep on board his own far right, which is making arguments that they should actually not only continue to occupy Gaza, but kick the Palestinians out. So, I mean, that's making it most difficult to get to any form of ceasefire or agreement. It's not, first and foremost the ICC. Now, I do accept at face value that if you are watching the CNN coverage this morning, if you are listening to what the ICC has put out, the takeaway that any citizen would have is, the perspective is that the Israeli leadership and Hamas are somehow moral equivalents. And that's a horrible statement to make. I don't accept it at all, but I do accept that the vast majority of people on the planet are closer to the ICC's statement than they are U.S. policy right now. And that's a problem, right? The Biden administration came out with a report. They delayed it a few days. And they made clear that there wasn't enough evidence for them to say definitively that war crimes were being committed. But they believed that war crimes were being committed. That's one of the reasons that you see Biden pulling back from providing some weaponry to the Israeli government. So, I mean, I will tell you that privately, the Biden administration has been pushing the Israeli government, saying, if you guys go into Rafah, one of the things that we will no longer be able to defend you around, at least publicly, is that war crimes are being committed. And certainly the Israelis don't accept Benny Gantz's statement that the Israelis are doing everything possible to protect civilians, everything possible to get humanitarian aid. The Americans don't accept that at all. So even though the Americans don't recognize the ICC, there are a number of points made by the ICC in this arrest warrant that privately U.S. officials do actually accept.
As they're seeking this arrest warrant. Beth, do you think this, just jumping off what Ian was saying, do you think that this impacts the influence President Biden and the administration has been trying to have over Israel's approach to this war? Does it strengthen it? Does it weaken it? What do you think?
Well, I think it complicates everything, which is, not the intention of the ICC, because I do think that Khan is trying to play it straight here. But I do think it makes everything more complicated. And as I said before, I think that, let's understand that a majority, we're seeing protests in the streets over the hostages and Netanyahu's deprioritization of hostages over prosecuting this war. Most Israelis still support the way that this war has been prosecuted. So, I think actually in the end, if these warrants go through, it's going to weaken Biden's hand because it will only force, I think, in some ways, the Israelis to double down. I know that's a little counterproductive, but the Israelis, say things like we're going to eat grass rather than accept the diktat of foreign voices in how we conduct this war. And that actually has been proven in polling. That's where the Israeli public is. So I think that they would go forward, and that makes everything here at home domestically much, much more complicated.